Okay. Hi, everybody. I see we've got a couple people that have joined us so far and some more people joining in. I'll give us just like another minute before we get started. Laura, does that sound good to you?
Yep, I think another minute or so we'll be ready to go.
Perfect. Hi, Sarah. All right. There it is. Looking for the chat.
Yeah, I'd love to know where people are from if they would like to do something in this next minute or so.
Yeah,
type in the chat box where you're from.
It's not. Okay. So just so you guys know, we also have a poll that you're welcome to take, giving us an idea of where you're at with your startup if you have one. So feel free to do that. And then I guess, do you want to get started, Laura, or do we want to wait like another minute?
I think we can go ahead and get started. You know, the replay is available if anybody wants to misses the beginning and wants to start over.
Very true. Okay. All right. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to Moving Forward, How to Evaluate, Establish, and Scale Your Startup for Growth. I'm Leah Weir. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here at CoveyCS. Today's presenters are Jason Covey, he's the President of CoveyCS, and Laura Thorne of Laura Thorne Consulting. So today's webinar, we're going to discuss the path for startups from idea to launch. At the end, we are going to have an open Q&A, so feel free to post your questions along the way, and we will answer them towards the end. There is also a poll that you're welcome to take. That would be fantastic if you did. So I'll give you just a little bit about CoveyCS. So at CoveyCS, we are a software consulting, integration, and development firm. We're located in Utica, New York. We specialize in helping startups, manufacturers, and established businesses buy, build, and integrate software that actually works for their business. So specifically for startups, whether or not you need the startup to run your business or you need the startup to be your business, we can assist with that. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Laura to get us started.
Thanks, Leah. I want to thank you for having me co-host this webinar with you. I always enjoy working with you guys. So Jason, you want to introduce yourself really quick? Leah did a good introduction of your company.
Sure. So I'm Jason Covey. I'm the President of CoveyCS. I've been a software developer and consultant for a very long time, and I've helped tons of organizations launch new products within themselves and new initiatives related to software, you know, new processes. And even in a big organization, launching a new initiative is very much like a startup within it. And then I've also helped traditional startups start new things as well. Turn it over to you, Laura, to introduce yourself.
Thank you. So my name is Laura Thorne of Self-Named Consulting. I do performance improvement for companies, and I focus on organizational learning, which is a huge way to get a competitive advantage, and leadership development. And I have many years of experience in several different industries. My background is in technology, programming, and environmental science. And I use a process called the role model way to implement the work that I do with companies.
Very good.
So if everyone's ready, we'll get started talking about the startup journey today. And if you are just at the idea stage, this may seem completely impossible. And actually, no matter what stage you're at, the future for your company or business may seem impossible for your big dream. But we are here to help. And an important thing is to know that even though the odds for succeeding in a startup are very low to make it past 5 years, it has been done. And so it's important to look at what works and what has been done before without just rushing headlong in and doing a lot of work, trial and error on your own. So it's exciting that you're here trying to grab some knowledge, and then we are here to help you. If you have questions about the tech side, you can always contact Covey afterwards. I have more, like I said, about putting your strategy together and leadership develop as you're hiring people. So we are here to help you after we're done with this. As we go through this webinar, we're going to follow this diagram right here, which is a pretty good representation of a typical startup. Of course, everyone has their own journey and things are a little bit different, but in general, everyone's going to go through the different pieces of this curve in some way or form and for different lengths of time. So some startups ramp up and take off very quickly, and others may take even years. I've known people who've been in startup mode for 5 years or longer because it takes a lot of time to research and develop the idea that they have. So it just depends on what you're working through. But we will work through each part of this throughout the webinar to use it as our sort of guide. So let's start out with the first phase, which is it's pre-startup. When you just have your idea, an idea is not a product. It's not something you can patent. You can't take it to a customer and get money for your idea generally. And so this is a point where you are going to get that big reality check. Is this actually something I can actually turn into a product? So again, looking at this startup growth curve, this is where we're at the very beginning. And this is one of the first sort of checkpoints along the curve where we find out whether your idea is actually something you can do. And then you start out with that high initial enthusiasm when you find out, yes, my idea will work, and then you move on to the next level. So in this phase, you have an idea and you're going to start testing it. You have to do a lot of research, and you'll be looking at the market, trying to see if there is actually a need for your product or service. You'll be looking at the technical feasibility, how much money do you think it's going to cost, and how much do you going to need to get it, and then a lot of personal stuff. So do you even have what it takes? Because it takes a lot to be an entrepreneur and take an idea from start to finish. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Jason to talk about the technical side and how he works with people at this phase.
Well, at this point, you're either going to need software because software is the product you're selling, or you're going to need software to actually run your business because you have to be fast and automated. So either way, you have to really identify what your minimum viable product is for software. And a minimum viable product is the smallest amount of software you can write that provides value to the end user. So you want to really take out the bells and whistles because you don't know. You want to do it in a very iterative fashion to make sure you don't overdevelop anything. And that goes with, testing your idea on your target customers to make sure it's really what they want and getting that feedback, which is very, very important. So once you've first identified your minimum viable product, then there's three things you should look at that I think are really the cornerstone of your vision for the software, which is the first thing is it technically feasible? Can it even be done? And this is, if you're a technical person, you might be able to do the research yourself. If you're not, then you might call someone like us to do it. But this is, I have an idea and I need to know if it's even possible given technology. So once you do that, you want to look at your data sourcing. So a lot of startups skip over this step. They need some body of data that they don't quite know how to get. They might know it exists. So for instance, if they have an app idea for how to enhance Facebook, we might look at, can they get access to the Facebook data that they even need without making a crazy partnership with Facebook, which is unlikely. So we really have to look at the data sourcing. Another example might be if they need some publicly available government database, which is going to be a lot easier to get because of freedom of information. But we still need to look at how that data is stored and how we can program things to get it out of there, and if it would cost any money to get, because that needs to be included in your budget. And then the last thing we want to look at, and this is the most important one, probably, as long as it's technically feasible and we can get your data, is what the user interface is going to look like. So this is how your users are going to interact with your application. You really need to put a lot of thought into this, because this is where the money is being spent by the big guys like Facebook and Instagram. It's all on user interface design. So with that, does that make sense, Laura?
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a lot of good points too that touch on some other things. You know, it's not just about your idea and yes, you're going to do all those things you just said. Is it technically feasible? What kind of software am I going to need? And you probably are going to need some level of both tech or app or user interface for the product or service, but also to run your business, like you said. And even, you know, at this point, you're going to start building a database and talking to customers. And so you need a CRM of some kind. And having gone through this process myself, I know, and testing all the CRMs out there, it's not easy to find one that just off the shelf works for you. So research in this phase is really, really key for so many things. You know, who's the market, who is interested in this, and not making assumptions. So it's really important to learn how to ask good questions and get feedback from people to ask better questions, and then test those assumptions, the things that you aren't sure about. You know, this is the idea that I have. Is it marketable? What do I actually know? And I know from fact, and I've validated that with data, or things that I assume and I need to validate or disprove with data. And you can't track all that on paper. You know, ideally you're working with at least a spreadsheet or better and building that up into what you're going to use moving forward. Do you have anything to add before we go on to the next phase?
No, that about sums it up. I mean, you really need to make sure that what you're doing is technically feasible. Just drive it home. And you need to know where your data is coming from precisely. And you need to have some idea of what your user interface is going to look like. And you should actually get some customer feedback here too. I'll add that on your concept. So talk to a potential customer, at least a couple, see what they think of the idea before going on and trying to get to the next phase.
Absolutely. And then when you have all that, you've taken your customer feedback and you're continuing to build it, then you're going to actually start putting that product together and doing additional testing. And that's when you kind of move into the next phase. You've already decided, okay, we validated that we have a good product idea or service, and now we want to explore additional ideas, validate further with customers, and continue to build. So here we are now in the startup growth curve, moving into that trough of sorrow. And the reason this is because some days, some weeks, some months, you're going to have great successes. You're going to have customers who think it's, you know, the cat's pajamas, and you won maybe some funding, or, you know, you've done really well. And then you're going to have other days, months, weeks where nobody's coming in, nobody's answering your emails. Maybe an idea that you thought was going to work doesn't actually turn out to work, and then you have to pivot. So the troughs, the ups and downs, signify mindset, successes, budget, pivots, starting over, trial and error. So you want to minimize that, and everything that you can do to look forward and plan for and answer those questions you have will help you to have. You're going to have ups and downs, but you want to minimize how deep those ups and downs are, because one super hard fall could be the end of your business. You know, if you run out of money before you get to the next pivot or upturn. So this area in the growth curve and in your startup journey is characterized by looking for more funding. Typically, there are startups that, you know, bootstrap their own project and don't actually have to go out for funds. But if you're doing a technical thing and you've got to pay to build software, then you're probably going to be going out looking for funds, whether it's through sponsorships or venture capital or any of the others. We already talked about you will be continuing to actually build out your minimum viable product and continue to test it, and try to start now getting some actual, like a pilot or a beta version, and actually have some paid customers. And you'll be not just surveying them, but getting real feedback and interviewing them and asking good questions. like I said, having some followers and building paid trials. And now I'd like to turn it over to Jason to add to that from the technical side.
Well, here's where you're going to start wanting to find technical resources. So either you are a technical person yourself, or you're going to have to find someone who is. And whether you partner with them or you pay them outright from your funding, that's up to you. But you really have to start evaluating technical partners to work with if it's not going to be you. So there's lots of different things you can look for when you're looking for a technical partner. Generally, it's if you're small enough, it's going to probably be a small group of people or an individual that's going to help you out, or someone who works for a firm like us. But what you want to really look for on the resume is a track record of success of completing projects, of staying on top of technology curves, because you're probably going to want to build this in whatever, maybe not quite cutting edge, but a little bit back from the cutting edge. You don't want to be in that space where everything is like so bleeding edge that it's subject to change in like 6 months. So you have to be careful when choosing a technology that you really evaluate, that you really focus on getting your requirements done and not so much over engineering it in a brand new technology. So, and again, depending on whether you need software as your product or to actually run your business will make a difference. So if you need to buy software, you might be looking at different technical resources that kind of sell software versus technical resources that produce software. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'll just add too that when you're talking about, building your app and figuring out your solution, that you also have to be in the stage figuring out what it's going to cost. So there's also, this is what we want to do versus, how much is it going to cost and those fees are going to pay for it. Do you work, Jason, with customers on that portion of it as well?
We do work and help them figure out what the cost of software would be. For some startups, it's a little more straightforward than others, especially if their idea is so novel that it requires a heavy amount of research and development to even determine what technology to use, or maybe the technology has to be invented. Then it becomes very difficult to determine the cost. So an R&D project is much more difficult than a straightforward, I have an idea to integrate these systems together and that will, make customers' lives easier. That's much easier to determine the cost of than an R&D project. So what are your thoughts on R&D projects? Do you run into them a lot?
Yeah, so I think that's a good example of, the different types of startups that are out there, and knowing it's important for you to recognize and know what kind of company you're trying to build. And it's all about looking forward, which is often really hard because at this point you're doing so much in trying to just build a product, right? And get customer feedback and spend time. It takes a long time to contact people and to try to make connections and then process all of the information that you get back from them and turn it into a solution. But at the same time, then you have to also be going out and figuring out how much is this thing going to cost, if it has parts. If your product is something that you need to have manufactured, then you're researching that. And at the same time, you're building your pitch deck, and you're out there, especially with research and design, trying to tell somebody this is why they should give you money when they haven't actually built out the actual final solution yet. So you have to believe in what you're doing, and you also have to be able to convince other people that they should take this journey with you. And if you haven't thought about what kind of company you are, who you envision your customers to be, you're very likely not going to get people to actually invest in you. So it's a lot of moving parts all at the same time. And for the research and development side, that's a whole another aspect to it.
Right. That's why a lot of companies that start off, the technical resources are actually the partner of the startup, or you bring them on as a partner, because the research and development side is just so nebulous that it really has to be someone who's very, very invested in getting it done. So for instance, if you went to a software development company and asked for a fixed quote on something that you can't quite figure out how it's going to get done, they're either not going to deliver for that fixed amount of money, or they're going to lose a ton of money on it themselves. And that's not good for you either, because that means they're going to lose interest in your project. So again, I see a lot of technical resources becoming actual partners in the startup when it's very research and development heavy, because the amount of time required simply can't be pinpointed.
Right, that makes sense. And the fact that you're doing the research and development, finding the right partners and doing your homework on those people too, to make sure that they're not just going to take your money and not deliver for you, is important. Because you have, especially if you've borrowed the money, you have an obligation to use it responsibly. So even at this point too, you may need software for your budget, whether again, it's off the shelf, or, you've hired a CPA, somebody who can really help you understand the numbers and the financials that you're working with, so that you can be fiscally responsible with the money that you have. Because again, one of those deep troughs where you run out of money before you've gotten to the next phase could be the end of your company.
Correct.
All right, let's move on to the last phase, scaling. So if you've gotten here, congratulations, you've made it through building out your idea, and you've started to get some people to sign on, maybe some subscribers or some initial beta testers, and have that feedback that yes, this thing is going to work, and the features that you've already built into your MVP are getting positive feedback from people. You've hopefully gotten some good first testers who have maybe some clout, some big names, so that you can take that forward with you when you say, hey, I've got this product, I've started it, and Nestle, Coca-Cola, Google, they were interested in it. And that makes other people go, oh, well, if those people are interested in it, then maybe I should be too. So another thing to consider when you are looking for who's going to endorse and try out your product. This is that blue line there kind of represents transition points. If you are going to scale up or not, you've hopefully already thought of this as you're building your product. And looking forward, if your product is one-to-one, you can only sell one product to one customer one time, and you don't have a means to bring them back, to have them subscribe, to have them reuse, then you're not able to scale up. Scale up means that you're able to expand your reach without expanding the work that you're doing one-to-one with people. And that is something that you would have already thought of. And in this phase, we're looking at possibly still doing pitches, but hopefully you've started bringing in some actual income from customers. You're launching this validated product that you have, so now you need to move into marketing it. How are you actually putting it out there instead of one-to-one customer calling? Because again, you've got to scale up and increase your reach. You're still continuing to test features and thinking about, additional services, additional features, but really honing in on this one thing that you do. And then you're going to be bringing on help. So before, you brought on just your technical help, the person who was going to be your CTO. And now you need to bring on more of the people who are doing your marketing, who are helping you with HR, who are doing sales. And you have to make a shift then from just the engineer who was working on a product to the actual leader that you need to be to communicate your vision and to keep the team that you hire on track. And at the same time, you've initially created a business plan, and that's what you've been pitching to people and bringing for loans and showing around. But now you need to have a strategy. And you've had a strategy already, you've thought about what you're doing, but now it needs to become something that you actually operate from, and it needs to incorporate some continuous learning. So Jason, tell us some more about the technical side of this phase.
So while you're scaling up, your software is obviously going to change. We recommend that customers use an agile process for feature additions, which means that you don't try to do too much at once. For everything you want to change, you still find that minimum viable product, you still do customer testing, And you even might want to find, since you in theory have more customers now, you might want to find a group of customers that are willing to always be beta testers. Some customers really enjoy doing beta testing because they get to help shape the features of the software they use. So they love it. They love being able to give that feedback and provide that support, because it really does make a better product for them in the end. The other thing is that once you make software, it doesn't stop being made. Like, it's not like, oh, I bought that, I'm done now. You have to continually evaluate your business requirements against your software. So just your business requirements will always be changing. So periodically, maybe once a quarter, maybe once every month if you're that big, you would go through your business requirements, see how they changed, and then evaluate your software and what your software can do against those requirements and make any changes if necessary. And you want to be very proactive and diligent about doing that. Otherwise, your software actually goes stale. So you see, like, a lot of people have old software. They complain about it. It's slow. It doesn't work. Doesn't do what they need it to do. Well, that's because they didn't proactively try to change it as they went along. So when you first bought the software, it wasn't like that probably, right? It became that way over time because your business requirements changed in such a way that the software no longer meets them. And the other thing I'll add is that if you're the technical person who is also the leader and the founder, you're going to enter this weird phase where you're going to be more of a leader than a technical person. So a lot of, especially engineers, like to still engineer, which is fine, but you just have to recognize that you're also like the leader of the company now, and you have to start delegating some of that engineering to the lower ranks. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that's a huge part of this scaling up, and a part where I think some business leaders fail because, you know, they will hire their brother, cousin, friend to be on their team, and that causes two problems because, one, that person is not necessarily actually capable of being the best person for the job, but communicating and, you know, leading a person who is your family causes, you know, problems within itself. And when you're launching a startup, this isn't the time to bring that kind of risk onto your platform. So it's important to be sure that you are starting off with a hiring process that works for your company and is not leaning on the convenient side. So starting a really good hiring practice takes time, and it takes a lot of intentional thought, looking at what now, as you're scaling up, is, you know, what's important to our company and how do we want to portray that to our customers? How are we building that even into our product? Because that creates alignment when people understand that I'm connecting with you. It's super important today to have customers who not only just want your product, but connect with who you are as a company. And it's important that your values show through in how you market yourself and brand, and even through the hiring practice and the people that you hire. So the people that you hire need to, one, whatever you're hiring for, they need to be better than you at it. You know, if it's something that you can do better than the person yourself, don't hire that person. And then, like I've seen with you, you have a great team, and the people that you hire on, you know, they're really good at what they do, and that's important and part of your success. And then having that plan integrated with that is important too, so that you can continually be communicating that message. A lot of what's hard for people to shift from engineer doer to leadership position is it feels awkward to continually telling people, like, here's our values, this is what we're doing, congratulations. It just doesn't feel, like you said, it feels weird, but that's essential. And learning to delegate and let things go and let people maybe take on a project differently than you would, as long as they understand what the goal is and the whys and hows of what we're doing, it should work out in your best interest. You want to have a team of people who will tell you what they think about what you're doing, not just people who will say, yes, Jason, we'll do whatever you say. From your personal experience, like, what advice do you have from someone shifting from that engineer to leader position?
Try to still engineer, actually, because don't stop entirely. Try to do at least a little bit of it. You know, sit in on design meetings, still play around with stuff. Make sure you're still practicing, you know, what you're good at. but also make sure you trust your employees to do a good job. Don't try to micromanage their engineering because they're very smart people too. Those are the two biggest pieces of advice I can give in that respect.
Right. I think trust is a huge part of it. That lends a lot to a person's personal satisfaction on the job. You know, if they feel that they're being trusted by the people they work with, it's very much more satisfying than being told what to do or questioned about why you're doing something. And then tell me a little bit more about continuous improvement. I know that you work with customers on that, and you know, from a strategy standpoint, of course, I'm always preaching you've got to be continuously learning from everything that you're doing, and that's the difference between just having a plan and having a strategy. Learning from what you've done and incorporating that learning into the next step, next phase. How does that look from a tech side?
Well, like any continuous improvement, it starts with a measurement. You have to have some kind of KPI or key performance indicators that you're measuring and that you know. And it could be as simple as you know, how many sales you're getting, or what's your profit margin. Those are very simple KPIs, but you have to have something at least that you can then improve. So then if your goal is, let's say you're manufacturing equipment and your goal is to use your equipment 5% more, you might look at what is keeping, you know, the equipment from being used. Is the equipment down? Is it takes too long to get things from one machine to another? You could look at all that and try to really reduce it and improve it. And you want to try and do it incrementally, just like I said with the software, the minimum viable product. What is the smallest change I can make that really nets a good result? You don't want to do too much at once because you don't want to institute a giant change and then have it not work and have to roll it all back. So you do it incrementally. That's part of the theory behind Kaizen and Lean and all that stuff. So you really should get employees of all levels involved in continuous improvement, because people in the higher ranks should know what the people in the lower ranks are doing, and the people in the lower ranks are the ones who have to do all the work on the ground anyway. So they should really be involved in helping to improve it, and they like that too, because they like feeling that they you know, that they are contributing to overall business success. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And you touched on a key point about the people with boots on the ground who are interfacing directly with the product and the customer. They need to feel comfortable, and that goes back to the trust thing, to be able to say, this is what we think from what we're hearing, and not trying to cover up mistakes or hide things or feel like, you know, I reported an issue 4 times and nothing was done about it, so I'm not going to report the 5th time. You know, those are important as a leader to instill, and they have to be done. And that's all part of building your culture, and it has to be done with purpose. It's not going to happen on its own. So I think we covered a lot for the launching. Anything else that you want to add before we move to questions?
I'd say, again, be careful how you spend your money on the technical side, because you can blow a lot of money really quickly if you hire and choose the wrong companies to work with. And aside from that, make sure you're constantly learning, constantly figuring out how to make things better, and don't become stagnant.
Good advice. And I think I had planned to mention before, if you haven't read The Lean Startup, it's a great book that talks a little bit more about reducing trial and error and how you can do more of the scientific method for determining when to pivot and minimizing do-overs and rework. So with that, I think, Leo, we'll hand it over to you for questions.
Sure. Yep. So with that, thank you everybody first for attending. This will be available on demand afterwards, and I can also send you some information afterwards as well. If anybody has any questions, post them in the chat and we can go over them. Yeah. So does anybody have any questions? Feel free to type them out. And we'll get started with answering some questions. Or if anybody wants to have a consultation, we do 30-minute consultations here at CoveyCS to talk about your idea and see if it is viable. So we can get started with that.